at the Southeast Missouri State University Law Enforcement Academy. We're going to be talking today about diversity, legitimacy, myths, and biases, and how all of this kind of ties together. So, as Emily said, if there's going to be a couple of places for questions. If you have some questions, you are more than welcome to ask them. I've been delivering this particular class for a couple of years now. Seems to have some pretty decent feedback, but at the end, I will share my phone number and my email address. And if you have any questions that you'd like to direct towards me, you are absolutely more than welcome to. So we're going to get going here. If I can get my keyboard to work. So what are the objectives? What are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to examine the concept of criminal justice legitimacy and how to establish that. We're going to discuss myths, stereotypes, prejudices, and how all of those are related. We are also going to touch on implicit and explicit bias. So what this class can do, what this class is designed to do, is to provide an opportunity to talk about differences, offer a different perspective at looking at groups, and then maybe review our own personal values and our own biases. What this class cannot do is change your personal values or attitudes, and it cannot change the way that the community perceives your organization. One of the themes we'll kind of see throughout this is that perception is reality. In order for you to change the way that the community perceives your organization, you have to involve them in your problem-solving approach and be genuine about it. Be real. Go out. You want to make a difference. You want to make a change. So, what is legitimacy? And I'm glad you asked. How do we obtain it? And what does it have to do with criminal justice? And you already saw this slide because I went forward too far. Does this seem legit? I can tell you that I am a man that likes to eat, so I will probably take my chances and try to get some free candy. But no, of course, that's not legit. What about this one? Does that seem legit? When I found this picture, it actually had a caption that says, I just used this axe to cut cheese with. Nothing to see here. By the way, it's National Cheese Day, so that's very appropriate for this. What about this one? Does this seem legit? Deposit your money here in the cardboard box. I personally am not falling for that one. The candy truck at the beginning, maybe. This one, no. So disclaimer, this is not legit. This is not a key cleaner. Do not try this at home. This is used to illustrate absurdity. This is not legit. Obviously, it does not seem legit, but it's just some of the many fun things that you can find out here on the internet. This is my favorite one. And I'll leave this here for just a second to kind of take it all in. Got the state prison at the next exit, don't pick up hitchhikers. And I love the sign where he has not underlined, I will not kill you. So does that seem legit? No, I'm not going to be falling for that one. And then the last one I want you to look at, if we have any fans of The Simpsons, you just read this in Snake's voice. That is the character there, where he says, I must have like fallen on a bullet. Does that seem legit? Of course not. So according to Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, legitimacy is defined as the quality or state of being legitimate. And then they define legitimate as allowed according to rules or laws, real, accepted, or official, or what I really like, and I think how it works good for us here, is fair or reasonable. And then that last one, believable. Are you believable? And when we're dealing with the public, that is going to make us or break us if we're believable. There are tons of ways to establish legitimacy, which is what we're going to talk about here. And for each of these, we're going to talk more in depth. I've got a couple of slides here. We'll talk about each one of those. My job most of the time is teaching police officers. I am still a police officer. I work part-time at Cape Girardeau Police Department, but my main job is to teach police officers, and I also teach classes at the university part-time. But when I'm teaching police officers, I talk about having public contacts, but not just any kind of public contact. And this is going to go for you as well. We need to have more positive public contacts than we do negative. And in law enforcement, that's difficult. And some people will ask, well, is that even possible? And I think it is. I think it takes getting out of our offices and doing some sort of volunteer work in the community. The local department that I work for is great about that. They'll go out and they'll talk to folks. You've heard of the Coffees with a Cop. They have neighborhood roll calls where they'll go into some areas and they'll say, look, we're going to have police officers stationed at the corner of Ellis and William on this date at this time. Come out and talk to us. What are your concerns for your community? And there's other ways to do that, especially for you all who are the professionals, whether it's getting involved in your local church, a community group, maybe doing some volunteer work with the Boys and Girls Club in your area. I just think it's important that our community see us doing something positive for our community. So one of the ways we're going to talk about establishing that is, don't forget you're helping people. That's your job. In order to do that, in order to establish legitimacy, you've got to have effective communication. And you need to develop empathy. And again, we'll talk about each of these a little bit more in depth as we move forward. And don't forget that empathy can be verbal or nonverbal. And I think it's an extremely important communication tool. So, first one here, don't forget you are helping people. You are the voice of crime victims everywhere. Never lose sight of that fact. You're helping people by keeping dangerous criminals off the streets. You're helping people by giving crime victims a voice, and you are that voice in the criminal justice system. So in working for the people, actually in every aspect of life, it's important to have good communication skills. And you are all professionals. You all probably have way better communication skills than I do, but we'll break it down just a little bit here. There's three basic aspects of communicating with someone. There's the content, and this is your word choice. And that accounts for about 7% of your believability from the receiver's point of view when you're talking to someone. Then you've got your voice. This is your pace, pitch, and modulation, and that counts for about 35 to 40% of believability, again, from the receiver's point of view. And then you've got the other nonverbals. That's what the ONV stands for, other nonverbals. This is your body language. And that accounts for the majority of your believability from the receiver's point of view when communicating. So let's talk about each of these real quick. And this is just another slide that says the same thing, but I bring this up because you'll see that if you add up voice and other nonverbals, that's about 90%. And what we do is we call that your delivery style. So what is content? Content is simply the words you're using. You're all experts in the law, and you have a believability factor built in because of your education and because of the positions that you hold. However, when speaking with someone face to face, the what you're saying or the content only accounts for about 7 to 10% of the believability in your message. Your voice is the second part of that, and this is your pace, pitch, or modulation. Pace is how slow, fast, and or controlled or uncontrolled you're speaking. Pitch is how high or how low the tone of your voice is. And then modulation is where you are placing emphasis in what you're saying. I'm going to give you an example here. And here's a sentence that, depending on where you place the emphasis, it can mean about 5 or 6 different things. So I'm going to do, excuse me, some emphasis placing here. I never said he stole the money, meaning somebody else may have, or I never said he stole the money. It's just an emphatic denial. How about I never said he stole the money? Maybe I insinuated it in some other way. Maybe it wasn't verbal, maybe it was in writing. Or I never said he stole the money. Could be insinuating that maybe he borrowed the money. Or how about this last one? I never said he stole the money. Completely changing the emphasis, or changing the meaning of the sentence, regardless of where or every time I place the emphasis somewhere else. By the way, this is not mine. I didn't make this up. This comes from Dr. George Thompson, who was the founder of the Verbal Judo Institute. He was a wonderful guy in communication, and this is from him. So we need to give credit where credit is due. But you can see just by where you place the emphasis changes the meaning of a simple sentence, I never said he stole the money. My mom says she hopes I have kids like me, but I don't like the way she says it. I don't know about any of you, but my mom said that about me as well. So when speaking with someone, the tone of your voice has more power and effect than the content of what you're saying. It's not what you said, but how you said it. So what are other nonverbals? Well, like we talked about already, this is the body language. It could be the stance that you're taking. It could be distracting hand motions. It could be eye contact or lack of eye contact. Or a big one is change in pace, pitch, or modulation. These are things to watch for when you're dealing with someone in the public, especially if you've got someone who may be agitated in your office that you're dealing with. These are all body language indicators. But the thing to remember is we communicate with our body language too. So if we are talking to somebody and we're sitting there, they're across our desk from us, and we're taking big, deep sighs, maybe rolling our eyes or looking away as they're talking, what kind of message are we sending to that person? We might be saying the right things. We may be saying, sir, ma'am, I hear your complaint and I believe you 100% and I really want to help you. But if we're sitting there and we're sighing and we're rolling our eyes, what message are they actually receiving? Are they receiving the message that we actually care? Well, no, they're not. Another part of body language or other nonverbals is active listening. So how do we active listen? Well, we keep an open and unbiased mind. Literally hear the words that are said to you. You can use paraphrasing. It's a very, very powerful communication tool. And you can paraphrase content. You can also paraphrase emotions. Simply pausing and listening to someone without judgment is one of the most powerful communication tools we have. And this next video, or not this next video, it's actually the first video. You'll see what I'm talking about here.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
You do have a nail in your head.
It's not about the
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Sounds really hard.
How?
Oh, come on. If you would just
Don't.
try to see things my way. So I have to keep on working till I can go on. We can work it out. We can work it out.
So it's not about the nail. My favorite part of that is when she says that all her sweaters are snagged. So stop and listen to what folks say. A lot of times that's really all they're looking at, is they want to just have someone listen to them and be heard. So what about empathy? What is empathy? Well, empathy is seeing through the eyes of another. You don't have to agree with that person, but think instead of how you would like to be treated under identical circumstances. I know in law enforcement, we're dealing with people at the worst of times, and I'm sure you get a lot of that as well. And just think, how would you like to be treated? Or how would you like one of your family members, your husband or your wife or your kids or your parents, how would you like them to be treated under identical circumstances? And then try to mirror that, try to treat people that way. How people feel about your organization, right or wrong, is a reality that we have to face. And again, it all goes back to perception is reality. And then the last part here about building legitimacy is the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And maybe that sounds overly simplistic, and maybe it is. But when we start a law enforcement academy, day one, this is one of the things that we start talking about, is you have to treat people the way that you will want to be treated, or the way, again, that you would want your family members treated. So I hope that makes sense. And then kind of to tie all the legitimacy stuff together, we've said this over and over. Perception is reality. Right or wrong, the public's perception of you and your organization guides the way many citizens react and whether or not they are going to cooperate with you. So criminal justice legitimacy, therefore, is the way that your community views you and your department or your organization. In short, it's how believable are you? Are you out in the community doing things with the community? Or do you return phone calls, or do you not return phone calls? Establishing that legitimacy with your community is huge in getting through bumps in the road. And you know, it's no secret that there's some criminal justice issues occurring in our country right now. So you got to get out, you got to talk to folks, and you have to be believable, and you have to genuinely want to help people. If you don't genuinely want to help people, then you're probably not going to be very successful in this business. So before we move on, are there any questions about anything we've covered so far? And this we'll tie all this together here in a little bit. So I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions, if Emily has any.
Nothing came in via chat, and I don't see any hands.
Okay, cool. So the next part of this is we're going to start talking about myths, stereotypes, and prejudices. And then again, how those are all interrelated and how they tie together. We're going to start with culture. So what is culture? Well, culture is a learned behavior of a group of people. It's typically passed on from generation to generation. Myths by themselves typically are not positive or negative. However, some myths can last for generations. How are myths and culture related? Because myths are an ill-founded belief given uncritical acceptance by members of a group, and typically that's cultural. Typically, again, it's going to be passed from generation to generation. And as we just said, myths can last for a long time, and by themselves, they don't necessarily have to be positive or negative. They can even affect how we react to certain situations. So the ancient dragon, I don't know if any of you have heard of this or the myth behind this, but this obviously is a picture of a solar eclipse. Ancient people thought that the sun was being swallowed by a dragon. So in order to prevent the dragon from taking the sun away forever, they'd all gather outside and they would make as much noise as they could in order to scare the dragon away. They wanted the dragon to spit the sun back out, and so they can continue on about their business. And they literally did this for thousands of years. And I know you can't answer me, but I'm going to ask this rhetorically. Why did that myth last for thousands of years, and it was passed from generation to generation, of going outside anytime there was a solar eclipse, going outside and trying to make a lot of noise to scare the dragon away? Well, and the answer is because it worked. They were always successful. They went outside, they made a lot of noise, and it always scared the dragon away. Of course, we know that's not what happened, but that is a myth and how it was able to be passed from generation to generation. So let's look at another myth. Here you see the surgeon's photograph from 1937. This, of course, is Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. And the first accounts of Nessie, or the Loch Ness Monster, actually go back to the 6th century. So that goes back a long way. The surgeon's photograph, again, which you see right here, from 1937, has been confirmed to be a hoax. Okay, this picture is a hoax, and I don't know if any of you knew that, and if I just crushed you, I'm sorry. But yeah, this picture is a hoax. But it's still Nessie. And in fact, the numbers I got, I looked, and the last numbers that were available were from 2014. Nessie, or the Loch Ness Monster, generates approximately $27 million every year in tourism. $27 million in tourism for folks to come and to go to Scotland and see the birthplace of Nessie and the Loch Ness Monster. Now, and again, if I crushed you because you didn't realize that the surgeon's photograph was a hoax, I apologize. This next one is even a little more controversial than Nessie. The hide and seek world champion, that's right, Bigfoot. This image is taken from the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 in Northern California. It's estimated that this piece of film is the second most studied piece of film in American history, behind the Zapruder film, of course. This film has never been debunked. Of course, you can't verify it either, but it has been studied over and over and over by people from Hollywood and the science fiction industry. And some of the things that when I was putting this together that I read is they went to a lot of special effects people and they said, hey, how possible is it to make this piece of film? And if you've never seen the film, it's interesting because Bigfoot kind of passes through, and he's got a weird gait about him and how he walks. He or she, I don't know if it's Miss Bigfoot or Mr. Bigfoot, I don't know. But how he walks and the gait, and then they were able to determine the size based on the film. And every special effects person that studied the film said that this film would be nearly impossible to fake. So what does that mean? Does that mean Bigfoot's real? Does it mean Bigfoot's not real? I don't know. That's not the scope of this class. However, this is one of the myths that has lasted from generation to generation. So we've talked a little bit about myths. We've even had a little fun with it, but you're probably asking yourself, what in the world does this have to do with diversity? As previously stated, myths by themselves, they're not typically positive or negative. It's our reaction to them and or our uncritical acceptance of them that can be an issue, because myths can turn into stereotypes. So what is a stereotype? It's a mental picture developed as a result of a myth. Characteristics that grow from myths, and then they're placed on people or on a group of people. And when I teach this class in person, I always ask this question. So we're talking about stereotypes. People who believe in Bigfoot are, and then I let the class fill in the blanks there at the end. And we typically have a lively discussion, because about half the class will say people who believe in Bigfoot are correct. Another half of the class will say, well, people who believe in Bigfoot are silly. And again, it's all in fun, but you can see how a stereotype can develop there. Bigfoot is also a big business item in certain parts of the country. Where I live locally, there is a local group of Bigfoot enthusiasts who meet regularly to discuss Mr. or Miss Bigfoot and their, the latest sightings or experiences and stuff that they've had with Bigfoot. And I'm not saying Bigfoot's real. I'm not saying Bigfoot's not real. There's a lot of stuff in this world we don't understand. All I'm saying is that this gives you the perfect example of a myth. And then if you think about someone based on your perspective, based on your stance, and whether you believe Bigfoot is real or not, a stereotype you can develop against someone who thinks the opposite of you. So the problem with stereotyping is people use it as a justification for their actions in accepting or rejecting a person or a group. So what about us? And when I say us, I'm talking about law enforcement, a group of people that get stereotyped quite frequently. I am a police officer, as I said earlier, so I'm not making fun of the police here, but there are some common stereotypes regarding law enforcement that we've all heard. So what are some of those stereotypes? We like to eat donuts. So let me ask you this, and this is a rhetorical question again, because I know you can't answer, but do stereotypes have to be incorrect? I can tell you that not all police officers like to eat donuts. I do, but not all police officers do. And by the way, the correct terminology, it's not a donut, it's a power ring. So you can, if you don't know that, that's a little bit of law enforcement insight. Power ring. 3 o'clock in the morning, you're on midnights, there's nothing going on. Couple of donuts or power rings to help you get through the rest of the night, that little sugar rush, good stuff. Anyway, other stereotypes. We like to beat people up. Police officers believe they're above the law, or they're on the take, or they have ticket quotas. And I'm sure that we've all heard these. Our perception of police officers, or anybody, any group, you put any group of people, they come from our own experiences. So if we've had negative interactions with police, our perception of the police is most likely going to be negative. If we've had good interactions with the police, then maybe we'll have a good perception. And that's why when I said earlier on, I think we need to give more contacts in the criminal justice system, and this is everybody, not just police, we need to have more positive contacts with the public. Because typically our contacts with the public, by the virtue of our jobs, by the virtue of what we do, typically our contacts are negative. So that's why it's important to get out and be a part of your community, be a part of that community outreach. So you can give the citizens a good experience with your office and with you personally. And let's not mince words here. Again, we talked about this. There's some issues in the criminal justice system. There's some issues in law enforcement, regardless of what side you stand on. There's some problems that need to be addressed. The difference is, if a police officer has a bad day and makes a mistake, it could be deadly. So I take my job and I take what we do here so seriously, and I speak with passion because I really believe these things. I really believe we have to get out. We have to talk to the public. We have to be a part of our community. When we get to the point where we don't want to be a part of the community that we live in and that we serve, we've become the problem. So sometimes we see people, and without even thinking about it, we judge them just because of the way that they look or the way they're dressed. Maybe we stereotype someone because of their beliefs. For some reason, as humans, we like to categorize people. We like to put people in categories. And the psychology behind this phenomena is well beyond the scope of this class, but it's important to note that many times stereotypes evolve from the differences that we have with others. So what are some of these common differences? The 5 most common categories of difference, of course, race, ethnicity, social class, gender, sexuality, and ability. These are just some of the ones. Typically when I ask this, I'll ask classes when I'm presenting this, and I'm not asking you because of the communication ability or lack of we got here, but I'll ask classes, so what are some other categories of difference? And a lot of times, again, I mentioned this early on, I like to eat. I'm a little bit bigger fellow. The students will typically look at me and they'll say another category of difference would be weight. I don't take it personally, but it is what it is. Some other categories could be political ideology. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of differences. My whole point here is, regardless of what the differences are, we have to try to work together and focus on some of the sameness that we have. And, that's humanity. We divide ourselves into categories and stereotype people who are different from us. We can quickly develop a huge problem, and it can turn into something very sinister. And that's exactly what we want to stay away from, and that's prejudice. A prejudice is a rigid attitude based on false information or misconceptions about a group. You give someone who's prejudiced new information and it doesn't change their mind, and that's an issue. Again, that's what we want to avoid. So kind of to back up here, myths, not necessarily bad or good, but they can develop into stereotypes. Some stereotypes, again, may be good, may be bad, but when left unchecked, they can turn into a prejudice, and that's a problem. So what is prejudice? Other than the definition that you see here in front of you, we're literally prejudging someone. Most people, most of us, have the ability to change our minds when we're given new information. So let's say that we just met someone and they were a complete jerk. And you're like, wow, that person was a complete jerk. But then later on, you learn that the day that we met them, they had just received some devastating news. Maybe they just lost a family member. And that gives us a broader understanding of possibly how they were acting. And given this new information, most people can easily change their mind. We might even develop empathy for that person. But when we talk about prejudice and people who use prejudice, we're talking about people who will not change their mind even when given new information. And that's a problem. So I'm going to put a slide up, and I just want you to think about what your first impression is. And after I'm going to put the slide up for, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. We'll leave it there. And then we're going to watch a video, and we're going to learn a little bit something about this slide. And my guess is that regardless of what your first impression is, it's going to be wrong. So here's the slide I'm talking about. Like I said, I'm going to leave this up here for a few minutes, or for a few seconds. So who are these folks? Let's meet them. Sorry, I don't know what I just did. I did something wrong.
Nothing gets more Americana than motorcycles. And we thought, like, Americans relate with motorcycles. This is something like embedded into American culture, and might as well do something what we enjoy and what American culture is all about.
politically educate all the people who Sikhs are and what they believe in. So if somebody sees a person like myself wearing a turban, that person doesn't think that this person is going to do some harm to anybody. So our main goal is to teach everybody who Sikhs are, what Sikhs believe in, and we're an integral part of the United States.
In our religion, one thing is utmost that you should be loyal to your country where you live and then to your religion, rather than like I'm Sikh first and American second. It's other way around. We are American first and Sikh second. What terrorists are trying to do, they are trying to turn Americans against Americans, and they are like achieving their goals. We need to raise awareness about how immigrants are contributing towards American culture and American economy.
So when I showed you that picture at first, my guess is none of you, unless you've seen this video before or saw the picture before, thought, okay, here's some guys with some really cool beards and some really awesome motorcycles. It's not, I just thought it was some folks from India when I first saw it. And again, I saw this video. I just think it's one of the coolest videos because it shows that you can't judge a book by its cover. Didn't really know what to expect when I first saw it, but like I said, I think it's just one of the coolest videos. I hope you liked it. Sometimes we'll allow stereotypes to control how we behave, and that's what gets us in trouble. So stereotypes can also make us biased. And how do biases affect us all? So we got two main biases that we're going to talk about. And we're just going to touch on these because, again, there are literally textbooks written about each of these. But I just want to talk about the basics here. So an implicit bias is the bias in judgment and or behavior that results from subtle cognitive processes that often operate at a level below conscious awareness and without intentional control. Where your explicit bias, the bias that some people have, whether correctly or incorrectly, about another group of people from which they act upon. I have looked for definitions for these two, and I have found literally dozens and dozens and dozens. I've read several books. I've taken several classes on bias, and the definitions that I've shown for you here are the ones that I like the best. Implicit bias operates at a level below conscious, which makes it very hard, if not impossible, to detect or to test for, which is why I don't spend a lot of time in any of the classes that I teach talking about it. Just be aware that it is a concept that's out there. There was one test that allegedly showed some whether or not you had implicit biases. It's called the implicit association test, but it's even come under fire recently and some scholarly scrutiny as there may be some faults with the algorithms behind the test. So just want you to be aware of the concept, and I know you all are, I'm sure you've all heard it. Subtle cognitive processes that operate at a level below conscious awareness. On the other hand, your explicit bias, that's easy to see. That's when someone outwardly expresses their bias or their hatred about a particular group, a particular topic, or maybe even a thought. Maybe someone is a racist, and I'm going to use neo-Nazis as an example because I don't know if you've ever had to deal with them, but when you have a group of white supremacists or neo-Nazis in your area, they're very loud, they're very vulgar, they're very in your face. They wear they've got tattoos all over their bodies, sometimes their necks and their faces, and they'll have swastikas. You can look at that person and know that that person probably has a bias. Now, can someone who is a neo-Nazi change their ways? Sure they can, of course they can. So again, looking at them, swastikas, neo-Nazi tattoos, be cautious, but that doesn't mean that that's how they still are. But typically when someone changes and moves away from that type of lifestyle, they'll get those tattoos and stuff removed. And again, the example, I just want to use that as an example because it's a perfect example of an explicit bias. It's easy to see, it's an outward expression. And there's absolutely no, there's no question about their bias. So, and again, very, very simply put, I understand. I hope that those make sense to you as we move on here. So why is it important to understand biases? Well, bias shapes our way of thinking about others, and it also shapes the way others think about us. So the better we understand this, the better we can communicate with our community and with each other. So we've talked a lot about myths, stereotypes and prejudices, etc. So let's tie this all together here. The more diversity we have in our workplace and in our personal lives, the less likely we are to develop inaccurate myths, stereotypes, or prejudices about people that are different from us. Valuing and understanding diversity could help reduce many of the problems that we see in society today. This is my opinion only, but I truly believe it as well. Diversity keeps us from developing these inaccurate myths. And we already talked about how a myth, a harmless little myth, can turn into a stereotype, and a stereotype can turn into a prejudice. Keep an open mind, and that's how you can just not allow yourself to go down that road. So what are some benefits of diversity to the community? Enhanced community support and improved public trust. Improved quality of service, reduced tension. If the community does not trust you or your organization, it's nearly impossible to effectively serve that community. That's true for those of you who are in the legal profession. It's especially true for us as police officers. If our community does not trust us, we cannot serve that community. Benefits of diversity to your organization: reduction of personal and agency exposures to claims and litigations, improved morale and effectiveness and professionalism within your organization, and then of course a positive impact on your organization's image. And again, you know, we're the criminal justice profession right now is it's got some stains on it, and we're going to have to really work hard to gain the public's trust and to get back to where we need to be. So some personal benefits of diversity: it can broaden your horizons and help you appreciate other cultures. One of the things, again, and I know I've talked about this several times, I like to eat. Food is an awesome thing that you can do to partake in other cultures. And you know, you can sit down with folks and eat, and food just does a lot of stuff that can bridge some gaps that you may have. At the local university that I work at, we have a Hispanic culture day, and the Hispanic students will bring in, they'll make food, and they'll bring in, you know, some of them will have dressed in traditional, from their culture, some traditional clothing, maybe some dances and stuff like that. It's a really cool time. It's a really cool event. It will help. When I went to it, obviously it broadened my horizons and it helped me appreciate other cultures. And I think it can do the same for you. And it allows you to build relationships with people that may be different from you. Valuing diversity gives you ethical satisfaction because you know you're doing everything you can to try to help the community that you serve. And as we said many, many times throughout this webinar so far, perception is reality. If you aren't legit to your community, they're not going to trust you. If they can't trust you, we cannot serve them. So work on that. Last slide here, my contact information. Again, I'm the training coordinator for the SEMO Law Enforcement Academy. There's my email address. There's my office phone number. So if Emily would, we can open this up to questions. If anybody has any questions, and if there's something that they want to say, you know, that they don't want to talk about here, send me an email. Call me on my office phone.
Yeah, and just a reminder on how to ask questions, you can either type them in the question box or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you on your end. So you just have to have a microphone for that.
So I guess unless there's any questions, again, feel free to contact me directly. I sincerely appreciate all of you joining us today. I know sometimes this is a hard topic to discuss. Hopefully we've done it in a way that's meaningful. And I know everybody's busy, especially after COVID-19, and everybody's just now, courts are opening back up and everything's opening back up across the state. I sincerely appreciate your time. And that's all I have.
All
Emily?
right. Yep. Thank you so much, Bobby, for being with us this morning. That's all we have. That's all I have as well. If you need something from me, feel free to email me as well. Otherwise, everybody have a great day. Thank you.